click this button. Okay, so thanks for joining. Again, thanks, Susie, for joining us today. Perhaps we can start with a little bit of housekeeping. So the plan is for this to be just about an hour long, and we're mainly going to be covering the questions of what is Rosebank, what people can do about it, some of the key dates that are coming up, and we will have a time for a little bit of a Q&A, whether that questions are from us at Zero Hour or whether it's from Susie at the Rosebank campaign. You'll be muted currently, but once we get to the Q&A, we'll ask you just to pop your hand up, and we'll go through as many questions as we can. If we can't get to all the questions, we probably will be, but if we can't, we do have a copy of the chat, so we can follow up with people about any questions we happen to miss. If people do need to drop off for any reason, there is no worries. We are recording it, so we will be sharing the recording with everyone that's signed up. And I think that's the main things we want to talk about. But maybe, Susie, you want to introduce yourself to people on the call, who you're joining from, and we can go from there.
Thanks, Alan. Hi, everyone. Good evening. So my name's Susie. I work for an organisation called UpLift, and I'm the campaign manager on the Stop Rosebank campaign. So I've been here been fighting this oil field for about 2.5 years at this point. I'm based in Wiltshire, sort of near Bath-ish, and I have two kids who are sort of running around. And they find it really funny to pop into the background of my calls. So apologies in advance if they start doing that. That's probably about me. And thank you all for having me, mainly. Really nice to be here. Were there any more intros, Alan?
The only other intro we'll give is you will see in the chat, he'll be popping in links as we talk about various things, is Sarah. Sarah works with us here in the Zero Hour team. So yeah, she'll be there for any sort of resources that we will be following up the call, but they're the main sort of intros we'll be covering at this stage. So maybe we just jump straight in. We recognise not everyone knows the full scale of Rosebank, but do you want to tell us just a little bit about what Rosebank is and why it's such a concerning project?
Sure. Thank you, Alan. And thank you to everyone who may have been campaigning on Rosebank over the years. But it's never too late to join the campaign against this oil field. So I'll give the oil field itself a bit of an introduction. So at the moment, Rosebank isn't really anything. It's a patch of the North Sea west of Shetland. But the way we tend to describe it a bit more often in the media is UK's biggest undeveloped oil field, climate vandalism, carbon bomb, some of the phrases that are thrown around a bit more to explain what it is. So Rosebank is enormous. It's 500 million barrels of oil. It's a reserve that's been known about for quite a long time. So the license for the field has existed for about 20 years. So it's been long known about, but it's in a particular part of the North Sea that is a tricky geology to drill. So we're at that point in the North Sea basin where the easy stuff has been drilled and we're left with the hard stuff at this point. So it's a particularly ferocious part of the North Sea. Not that any of it is much like a mill pond and easy anyway. So Rosebank is enormous. It's 90% oil, a tiny bit of gas. At the moment, Rosebank is owned by a sort of group of three main companies. So for the most part, it has been majority owned by Equinor, which is Norway's oil company. But this year, there was a bit of a change in ownership of it. So Equinor and Shell have joined forces and set up a new company called Adura. And Adura now happens to be the company that has the 80% stake in Rosebank. And then the sort of third partner, as it were, is Ithaca Energy, which is a UK listed, Aberdeen headquartered, pure play oil and gas company who happen to be majority owned by an Israeli fuel giant called Delek Group. And we'll come on to it in a bit, sort of what that means about where the money's going and the implications of that. But I mean, the campaign to stop Rosebank has been around for just over 2.5 years now. it's had, for something that doesn't exist, it's got quite an interesting history already. There have been some twists and turns in the tale of Rosebank. Um, it was actually approved by the previous government in 2023. So the Conservative government gave approval for it to go ahead, and then almost immediately that it was approved, the Stop Rosebank campaign and Greenpeace took the approval to court. So we had the government's decision to approve it in 2023. It went through judicial review, and we fought essentially on the grounds that the government didn't take into account the Scope 3 emissions of Rosebank, which is essentially the emissions that are created from the inevitable burning of Rosebank's oil and gas. So took that to court, and the approval of Rosebank was overturned, which was extraordinary. It was a huge moment. So that was the beginning of last year. So for the last year, it's been in a regulatory limbo, and we are right at the very sort of crux of the campaign, because we're waiting now to see what this government is going to decide to do about it, in a very different context of the fact that there's now there's a much stricter process they have to go through if they want to approve a new fossil fuel project, because now by law they have got to take into account those Scope 3 emissions, which wasn't the case before, which feels extraordinary that that was never taken into account as part of the environmental impact assessment. So before this new Scope 3 sort of rule, as it were, you just had to say how many carbon emissions there would be from the operation. So just from the operation of the rig and the operation of drilling. You didn't have to say anything about the burning of the oil that you were drilling for. But the courts sort of essentially found and have said now that it's inevitable that any oil and gas that you drill is going to be burned. So those emissions must be counted, which feels incredibly sensible, particularly in the context of a climate crisis. So that was all a really huge shift. So for the last year, yeah, that it's been sort of on pause, but the developers have been doing a few preparatory bits, because they are as confident as we campaigners are that it's going to be stopped. It looks like the developers are as confident that it's going to be approved. And I think people often ask, what do you think is going to happen? And I have for quite a while been very 50-50 about it. I could see reasonably how it could go either way. But in recent weeks, I'm feeling more optimistic that I do think it really could be rejected. I think it's probably worth going over just a couple of the reasons why Rosebank is a bad idea, because it's not actually always immediately obvious. And for this particular project, it's got a few things on its list. So generally, the top of the list is the climate implications. So because of the amount of oil and gas that's held within Rosebank, it's 254 million tons of carbon dioxide equivalent, which just sounds like a really big number. But it's the same emissions as the 73 lowest income countries in the world produce in a year. It's the same as 76 coal-fired power stations would produce in a year. Like it's a juggernaut. It's absolutely enormous. And the burning of Rosebank's emissions would completely bust UK carbon targets if we were to count it all fairly in the same time frame. So I think the climate arguments really do speak for themselves. And I think part of the optimism and hoping and thinking that Rosebank could well be rejected by the government very soon is that I think if you look at it just from a very objective point of view, now with those total 254 million tonnes and the UK's climate commitments, it feels like it should be impossible to square those two things, and it must be rejected. And that's all thanks to this new Scope 3 requirement as part of these fossil fuel projects. So I mean, that's the climate grounds. Economically, it's a very bad deal for the UK. We would be getting virtually nothing back through the Treasury, because there's often this argument about tax receipts, but where you'll probably have noticed that a lot of those oil giants are very good at creative accounting and rarely pay very much tax whatsoever. Shell, for example, paid absolutely no tax to the UK in 2024. Their 25 figure isn't out yet. Equinor, Norway's sort of state oil company, the biggest supplier of gas to the UK, paid something like £9 million in tax to the UK last year. So it's just tiny, and the tax argument doesn't really work there. And that's with the windfall tax in place. So the economics of it really aren't working. And there's also tax breaks available to developers while they're getting the project ready. So there's all sorts of ways that they will get away with not paying any tax on it. There's also a really compelling moral argument for Rosebank to be rejected, which is that Ithaca Energy, which is the 20% owner of Rosebank, is majority owned by Delek Group, which is an Israeli-based organization that the UN has put on a blacklist of organizations that are involved in the illegal occupation of Palestinian territories. And last year, Ithaca Energy sent hundreds of millions of pounds to Delek Group. Year on year, that's where their profit is going. Ithaca Energy is actually an organization, a group that's been growing. They merged with Eni about a year and a half ago. They're financially, they have a lot of money and they're getting bigger. They've got quite an aggressive acquisition strategy happening in the North Sea. So it would be very hard to argue that profit from Rosebank wouldn't be going towards activities which the UN has quite rightly recognised as being human rights abuses. And the government are very well aware of that. There's been legal advice sent to the government not so long ago saying that they really do need to have a really good look at it. They need to investigate it, and they need to be answerable to if they don't. And then I think what has been happening in the last few weeks, the sort of latest Middle East crisis, it really throws into sharp relief how vulnerable we are to the whims of dictators around the world when they start being aggressive and they start disrupting what is already a really fragile system of fossil fuels moving around the world. So there is an incredibly strong energy security argument that we just shouldn't be opening new oil fields because we can't be relying on oil and gas to keep us safe on a number of fronts. Suffice to say, Rosebank's oil wouldn't belong to the UK whatsoever. It would be taken off in a ship, refined elsewhere, and sold on the open market to the highest bidder. There's no preferential treatment to the UK's ability to buy that oil just because it was drilled in the UK's North Sea. So those are the top reasons for not letting Rosebank go ahead. I just want to check if anyone had any questions on that. Or should we do questions at the end, Alan? What would be your...
Yeah, maybe we do questions at the end because that means because we might cover some of them with some of the issues we'll be talking about. But I think that's a really strong summary of everything. And we know many of the people in this call will be aware of the climate impacts, but it's great to sort of hear more on the moral and economic arguments. And it is something I'm sure many of us have seen this week with what's happening with Iran and the spike in energy prices. About people are saying, we understand we need to meet these climate targets and we understand the environmental implications, but should we not approve the expansion of this oil and gas to reduce bills? What's the sort of main sort of argument against people that are, media claims that are saying let's just allow this one field to allow us to reduce bills?
Yeah, it's a noisy time out there in the media at the moment, and there's a lot of disinformation circulating as well, particularly about the role I think that an increase in drilling in the North Sea would have on bills. So one of the first things that happens every time there is a big global shock to fossil fuel production from one of the sort of geographies where a lot of the world's supply comes from is that our bills go up. It happened after Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and the government had to step in to the tune of around 180 billion in support for families here to help people deal with that increase. And during that time, the oil and gas giants made so much money. It was obscene how much money they made. So, our bills were in lockstep with their profits. Our bills went up and so did their profits. And the same thing will keep playing out whenever there is a shock like this. This sort of thing around why don't we just drill what we've got in the North Sea and let's use that, and then because it's our own, our bills will go down. I think the reality of the North Sea is that we've drilled it for the last 60 years, and the reality of it is that there's very little left there. What's easy to get, what's sort of insurable for the companies to get, what's quick to get up was taken out decades ago. So, I mean, that just wouldn't really work. And the price of our bills is also linked to the international price for oil and gas. So even if we had a glut in supply here that we somehow managed to bring here, refine here, and somehow then use in a helpful way in a short space of time, bills wise, they would still be going up because what happens in the rest of the world is impacting the price that we pay here. And that's the same for most countries. That's not specific just to the UK. Most countries that are predominantly reliant on fossil fuels have the bills and the prices work in pretty much the same way. And I mean, I think there is a projection that even if we were to start drilling in the North Sea, at the moment we're majority dependent on imports, and that would remain the same, even if we did drill what little is left. So the projections, the modelling all shows that over the next decades, we're just going to remain dependent on imports. And it is going to be the case that the international market will be setting the price for those. That's unless we take a bit of a course change and switch our energy system to being much more predominantly renewable. So I've got a little 7-year-old visitor. I'm just going to check what he wants.
Yeah, no worries.
Are you okay, honey?
Yes, there's a daddy long legs in the bathroom.
Oh, there's a daddy long legs in the bathroom. I would say just go round it, sweetheart. They don't hurt you.
I know.
Okay, you were just going to tell me?
Yes.
Thank you.
And so you can touch it.
Okay, great. I'll sort out daddy long legs afterwards. Sorry.
But yeah, I think that's the thing that it's such a shame about this sort of level of disinformation in media, because it sounds, on the surface, there's lots of things that sound reasonable as arguments until you actually look at, does evidence say this? And something that which we often say at Zero Hour to people who ever question the idea of, do we fund the just transition with just one more project, is the argument of the previous government and this one have both said that no amount of North Sea oil could change significantly the global market. So consumers, it's not a price argument. So it does become that tax argument, which you've quite rightly sort of said, because there's so much subsidies, doesn't also add up. So that sort of brings me on to a question which people probably quite rationally have in their mind, which is, if it doesn't reduce our bills and it doesn't help us anywhere closer to our climate targets, and it doesn't bring in enormous amount of tax revenue, who is benefiting? Who's benefiting from pushing the narrative that this is the projects that vitally need to go ahead? And why are there so many, whether it's media or MSPs or MPs, coming out and saying they support it?
Yeah, it's a very good question. I mean, the oil and gas industry has been one of the biggest industries. It's probably the biggest global industry. I don't know if AI or like tech might be like coming up for it now, but in the UK, it's a huge part of a lot of countries' national identity, their oil and gas industries. And I suppose there is like quite a cultural element to it, almost, particularly in communities where jobs have been dependent on the oil and gas industry over the last few decades. So I think there is a lot of like genuine support still for new oil and gas from people who have a genuine and very understandable attachment to the industry, because it has been good for people's livelihoods over the years. There's absolutely no doubt about that. And there are people that would make the argument to say, well, fossil fuels have powered our home, kept the lights on over the last 60 years. And that's also true. But I think where we are now is we have the really stark reality of the climate crisis, and it cannot be ignored at this point. By and large, at the moment, a lot of the support that we see for Rosebank, it can be traced back to the incredibly powerful oil and gas lobby. So there's no shortage of evidence that shows how much sort of face time the oil and gas PR lobby gets with policymakers and with politicians directly. Like, they are so much more able to be putting forward their arguments than any of us are. They have much better access, they're better funded, and they've been doing it for a really long time. They have a very well-established ecosystem for pushing a lot of their messaging. And there's no secret that they make very substantial financial donations to individual political figures, to political parties, so they're able to access sort of like higher powers, as it were. And then I think they're also very well coordinated in directly to the media as well. So it's just quite a slick operation. But I think often when you do dig down into who's incredibly vocal about wanting these new oil and gas fields, it's just the oil and gas industry itself. And then you go a step further, it's not really the workers that benefit from getting these huge windfalls of profit. It's the shareholders who, again, are one step behind these companies. So it's generally those who are going to make the money out of it are the shareholders of the oil and gas companies. So as taxpayers, it's certainly not us who are going to feel the benefit of it. There is a very real argument around jobs to be had about when you say, actually, don't open that oil and gas field, you are saying with that same statement, don't have those jobs. So with Rosebank, it is projected that there would be 525 jobs for the Rosebank project. So there is a hard reality to talk about. When I say stop Rosebank, I'm also saying no to those 525 jobs. But I think there is the flip side of that, is that these are no longer jobs that are going to last for a really long time. They're not stable jobs. And all of the opportunity does appear to be in the renewables industry, because that's an industry where we can do things a bit differently. I think we can have really good jobs that are long-term jobs that aren't going to be at risk from global shocks. And at the moment, there has been, now, if you look in the last 10 years, jobs in the North Sea have halved, and that's because the oil and gas is running out. There is just the binary fact that there's not as much there, so there aren't as many jobs. And opening one new oil field isn't going to stem that decline. It's not a real solution to the fact that there are big workforces in communities that need jobs that are better than the offer they've got at the moment. So I think there is in the same breath that we say stop Rosebank, I think we also need to say, and there needs to be a plan for the workers, because it's definitely not about sort of taking the rug from under anyone's feet. But these are jobs also that don't exist yet. This is an undeveloped oil field. It's not in operation, and we're saying to stop it. We're saying don't start it in the first place. But I think that's part of the about the who benefits from it. That the jobs argument is one that I think can often make it harder in the political space to have the discussion, because it's an uncomfortable truth of this transition. And I don't think there's a benefit in shying away from having that discussion. But yeah, and it'd be great to hear others' thoughts around that, perhaps when we come to the bit at the end.
Yeah, thank you so much. And your answer very much resonates with my experience where I am. I live in the northeast of Scotland, where, oil and gas is culturally just a part of lots of people's lives. Everyone knows someone who works offshore. And the moment you say we want to stop this project, there is a bit of a knee-jerk reaction by being like, is this rejection of, my uncle or my dad's job. So I think that's true about the jobs aspect too. It's a genuine fear that people have in their family about prosperity. So it's about selling the long term careers over short term jobs type argument. And platform Friends of the Earth Scotland, Greenpeace have done amazing work around this about our demands report on looking at what do oil and gas workers want, and a lot of them are saying we want that long term career again because these short term contracts in each project by project is a bit of a plaster fix. So I think that's really good, and the access to parliamentarians is a thing that I think concerns a lot of people. This feeling of when you see the sheer number of um, engagement between MPs in the oil and gas industry, it's no wonder that they're getting wins here and there from government. I've only got a couple more questions. Thankfully, they are going on to solutions, which is good. So the first one is we shared some of this in our newsletter, but for people that missed it, what are the ways that people can make their voice heard, whether it's online or in person, to try and say why they believe that this project isn't the way forward for a just transition?
I think it's worth noting actually that the Stop Rosebank campaign is quite a unique feeling thing because we don't really have a central point as such. It's been made up of grassroots groups over the last few years that sort of float in, float out, have peaks and troughs of activity along the way, but the activity's always been really spread across the UK, and loads of different groups get involved, bringing different perspectives, groups that have just completely different ways of doing things, different ways of like being active on climate issues, and some groups that are not so much about climate. That we've had quite an increase in, for example, like some of the Palestine solidarity groups have been really active with Stop Rosebank campaigning over the last year or so. So there's always a really big range of things to do, and often groups just do really creative things that are really relevant to where they live, which has been one of the loveliest things I think about this campaign, is how it's sort of people have ownership of it across the country depending where they live. So I guess an example of that, I was speaking the other day to a lovely lady called Pippa who lives in Penzance, and the way they do their Rosebank activism is with synchronized swimming. And they do like these lovely watery displays, and it's just gorgeous. And then like there's an art collective in Cambridge who do these really elaborate sort of set pieces, and then there's some of the more sort of established NGOs who do lots of like hard-hitting policy reports and have people taking it into Parliament. So there's a real diversity of ways that people have been active on this campaign over the last few years. But I suppose the unique thing about this moment right now is that we are expecting the government's decision on Rosebank at any moment. We like genuinely have no idea when it's coming. And the decision sits ultimately with Ed Miliband, Secretary of State, and the regulator. So it does boil down to like quite a small number of people. So because we're so close to the wire with the decision, we've been working with groups across the network to sort of come up with like what's the thing that's going to work best, where we've got like it feels like we haven't got much time left. They are genuinely making the real final decision now. Is that it's been whittled down to a few suggestions. And the main top thing that most people are working on is engaging with MPs and MSPs directly. So it's one of the strands of the campaign that's worked really well over the last year and has helped to keep, I think, mentions of Rosebank really high up in like official parliamentary proceeding. And it's been a really good way of demonstrating how broad opposition is to Rosebank, because there's been MPs and MSPs from across the country going into their respective parliaments, being able to talk about how they're hearing from Rosebank, from everyone, from everywhere. So at the moment, the big push is for writing to, meeting with, emailing, calling MPs and MSPs is really the number one thing. We've never really taken the tactic. No one's really picked up this idea of going directly, like seeing Ed Miliband as a tactic, as a target for any of like the sort of campaign heat, because I think the idea is that he's not the problem with new authors. Like, if anything, actually, he's been quite progressive with some of the policy moves that have happened over the past year. So even though the ultimate decision sits with him, no one's really said, you know what, we should just really target Ed. Like, a load of emails to him is really going to help, because it feels like, even though he's the decision maker, it does feel like barking up the wrong tree a bit. So it's been all about going to MPs and MSPs and asking them to advocate for stopping Rosebank in whatever way works for them. So depending which committees they're in, depending which debates they go to, which department they're in, it's utilising the democratic processes that they have. So at the moment, we have been building up this big caucus of opposition via a little campaigning device called the Stop Rosebank Pledge. So it's a short paragraph of words that essentially say, I pledge to do all I can to oppose the Rosebank oil field and advocate for a just transition, with a sort of worker-centred plan, and fixing leaky homes. So it's quite solution orientated, with a little flavour of, and I promise to advocate to stop Rosebank too. It was really hard actually working out the wording. It's like, what can we say that means something but isn't going to scare everyone off? So there's 51 MPs that have signed the pledge so far, and 12 MSPs, and we're really trying to grow that number. Once they have signed that pledge, they sort of find themselves at the end of my mailing list. And so I'm emailing them about once a week at the moment with some sort of ask. But it's a really nice way to bring everyone together, because then I'm sort of sending them questions, updated briefings, important quotes, all that sort of thing. And it's just trying to make them more campaigning, I suppose. So one of the quick ways to do it is, we've got a snazzy little setup that I think Alan's shared before, and that might be what you've got in the chat there. Is a postcard tool. So you just go online and you can write a little message to your MP, and it gets printed on a Stop Rosebank postcard and physically sent to their office. And the key ask of that is to get them to sign the Stop Rosebank pledge. We've also got an email tool all set up on the Stop Rosebank website. So it's got a pre-written email with all those top reasons why Rosebank should be stopped, with an ask for them to sign the pledge. And then one of the bigger actions we're doing is next Wednesday, or is it Tuesday? Whichever of the days next week is the 24th. We're doing a mass lobby it's Tuesday, is it? Thanks, Edith. We're doing a mass lobby at Westminster, where we're doing green carding, which is one of my favourite things to do. You just turn up unannounced. The security team know we're going, and they're all ready with a table, and you fill in a little green form, and your MP gets summoned to come and talk to you. And we gave it a bit of a trial run at the end of last year. It was absolutely brilliant. I met my MP through it and got him to sign the pledge. So it just works really well, and it's a really nice way, I think, also to meet other people in the Stop Rosebank network. So it would be lovely if you were able to come down to that next week. It's always a great day out. And we can help pay for trains, accommodation, all that sort of thing. And it would just be lovely to have you there if you're able to make it. And it really is fun. And we've got some little nice ideas to keep ourselves entertained in case we're sitting around waiting for MPs for a little while, which can happen. But those are the top things at the moment, I would say.
And we popped them in the chat. We will also pop lots of these resources in a follow-up email. But that's really great. And yeah, I very much agree on the green carding thing. It's I did it once, and because I live so far away, because I live in the northeast of Scotland, he came down, I think, out of confusion. He was like, oh, because he's a new MP, and he was like, well, I've never had this happen before, and I was there for work. I did say it's not just you, but I am here.
Brilliant.
But it is funny when they are like, oh, you're from very far away, so I really should come and give you an answer. I've got another question, and it sort of ties into a question in the chat. There's a sort of two stages to this. So one is you might not have the answer because it sort of feels quite future heavy, but if we're able to stop Rosebank, do you imagine the sort of tiebacks, the sort of loopholes in the end of new oil and gas? Like, do you think that will come back? Do you think that this will sort of be a message that says the current government's against expansion of oil and gas licenses, or do you think there's a chance that the industry will still see it as a condition of that particular field and will continue? And the follow-up question, which is what's in the chat, is also about the change of parliament. If the government changes in 2029, do you think that, and they were to do you think they would reapply? Do you think there is a chance there would be a second fight to stop it, or third, really?
Yeah, very good questions. I mean, the tiebacks is a really interesting one. So the government's announcement about tiebacks, which is this idea that if you have an existing oil or gas field, what you're allowed to do is drill for new oil and gas that you know is already there within a certain radius of it, and then tie it back almost physically with a pipe to that existing field, that existing infrastructure. Looking at because as soon as that announcement came out, try to have a look at like, well, how much oil and gas does that actually mean? Like, what is actually available to tie back of what's known already? And it's really not very much at all. So it's one of those things, and like the government have actually been talking about tiebacks in the last few days because they're sort of getting quite a lot of heat from a few sides about oil and gas at the moment. And the way that they've explained it is that it's basically a concession to the industry to ensure that existing fields can still be economically viable for those companies. So it did feel like, because they announced it all at the same time as really confirming their commitment to not issue any more exploration licenses. So it felt like they were giving a bit of a concession to the industry. So it did mean for like the climate lot, it was quite hard to know how to respond, because from a pragmatic point of view, you can see the argument for needing to not just infuriate the oil and gas industry all in one go. So I can see how that decision came about, but from the looks of it, there's not a huge amount that will be recoverable via tiebacks themselves. But there could be some surprises in there that we haven't foreseen yet. So it's quite difficult to say on that one. And then on the question about what happens if we get another government, we get a bunch of right wingers in 2029. Yeah, it's such a big risk to a lot of hard-won climate and environment, nature progress, probably also to human rights, civil rights, everything. It's a risk to everything, pretty much. But I think one of the things that we would definitely do is, if we do get Rosebank stopped, the next most important task is to absolutely protect that win somehow, to like try and wrap it up in legislation or something in a way that it would be really hard to reverse it. But then I think I do wonder, in thinking about it, how easy it might be to just restart an industry once it has sort of accepted what's happening. So I don't know if it would just be as simple as all it needs is a change of administration and then the companies can spring back to life. It's why I think there is a lot of activity across the climate environment space that is focusing on how to help people really see the real dangers of what could happen if a really extremist government were to get into power.
Yeah, no, thanks for that answer. And I think it's a real reminder of there's all sorts of storms that happen around stories around anything to do with oil and gas, and when that announcement was happening, there was a bit of a we were doing our very best to try and celebrate it for something that people were calling for a long time. And it's so important to hold on to those big victories, which are really big steps. And you can be concerned about aspects of tiebacks or areas that people can get around, but recognizing progress is the way that we can sort of start to build confidence with people we know in our life that things are actually happening because of pressure on MPs, and these campaigns were hard won. And I think I agree with the point of, once you start to show people were behind the idea of stopping it, it does mean a change of administration still has to overcome that obstacle of a huge amount of public opposition, and that trickles into the idea of sort of, investor confidence in that this will actually be viable and go ahead because of pushback. So I think every voice in sort of opposing this as the direction and supporting the alternatives is so vital right now, because those people who get elected, whatever party they end up being in, will be trying to win your vote at the next election. So telling them this isn't something I would ever get behind is a way you start to send that message, particularly when there's all the arguments you've said, when there is an economic a sense in it to do so either. So that's been really useful. I'm going to just change a setting quickly, but do just use your virtual hand, or you can wave at us if you've got questions for either of us. I'll just be 1 second. I'll allow you to unmute yourself. But yeah, do just, if you've got any questions, whether it's about the project or about our work, just pop your hand up and we can get to it. Anyone got a burning question? I've got a couple that I can ask if people are unsure. Maybe you've just covered it so comprehensively, possibly. But Edith, were you coming in?
I didn't actually have a question, but I was one of the ones who were thinking that it would be a good idea to drill in Rosebank, because I, like a lot of people, it's our own. So I have found this hugely informative. And I want to congratulate you on the depth of understanding of these very. I wouldn't have known so much about these things, but I can see, and I could be able to maybe persuade others that no, it's not a good idea. It's not going to benefit us. It seems very simplistic. It's our oil and we'll benefit. But I want to say, yeah, a huge congratulations and thanks for all this information that I've learned tonight. Thank you. Yeah, wish you well.
Well, that's really great to hear, because that's precisely why was one of the reasons we wanted to hold it, whether you had questions yourself or whether these questions were coming up for people in your life. Because, as I said, I live in the northeast, and there's so many stories that sell such simplistic narratives either way, and it's really hard to work out, like, is it that simple? Because that's just how simple it is, So I'm looking at the other side of things when they say we just need to end oil and gas, and people say about the environmental sector, oh, that's you're too simplistic. It's more nuanced than that. And then on the other side of things, they say we just need to drill our own oil and gas. And both sides, the truth is in the middle of it, is by being like, who benefits from the project? How does it serve this wider needs that we have? And the understanding of the energy sector is a thing that often gets missed, because I think it's the big thing that I said this to Suzi before this call, that there was two things that really cemented where my position was a while ago. And one of them was that the amount that was exported, was thinking, okay, so it's not a case of that we've got that 500 barrels of oil, we turn around and go, okay, that's ours, and that will help fund the transition. It is that private ownership was part of it. And the other one was the natural decline in the North Sea, was thinking about, this is a bit of a sticking plaster, the level of jobs. There needs to be a much longer term and bigger scale plan. And there's a lot that's not going right with that, the just transition. There's a lot of shortfalls in terms of how do you actually do the job replacement in renewables. And there's a lot of, so it's not a case of we're saying it's a really simple solution. So the fact that this has been informative on some of that nuance is exactly what we need in the world right now, when people are saying it's this or that, it's binary choice. You're either on our side or against us. The truth is, it's how do we serve our communities? So I'm really glad it was useful. Is there any other sort of burning questions that people have been thinking about, or even just talking points you might have come up against that you're wondering how we'd respond, whether it's in the media or in your own lives?
There's a question in the chat. Well, it's the comment, David, about the Green MPs. They have signed the pledge. There's a web page that shows all the MPs that have signed the pledge. The only one we haven't got is Hannah Martin. I feel like she's been too busy to read our emails since she won her seat. But
Yes.
we'll get her.
Oh, that's good. That's good that there is. And oh yeah, David, do you want to come in? You'll have to unmute yourself. I'll just click this button. There we go. You should be able to unmute yourself now.
Oh yes, yes, Susie, you called her Anna Martin. Her name's Anna Spencer. Not
Yes.
Anna Spencer. Hannah Spencer.
I've no idea
yes.
who Hannah Martin is.
No, Hannah Spencer, her name is. And the other thing is, the reason I said was when I did check the charts to see who signed, none of the Green Party members were on there, and maybe it's an out of date one. I went to see if my MP was on there. Now my MP is Martin Wrigley, Liberal Democrat. Now he is strongly opposed to Rosebank, but as far as I am aware, he has not signed the pledge, despite me asking him to on 2 occasions.
Yeah, he hasn't, has he? I'm just gonna thanks for raising it, David. I wonder if I've got a bit of a website problem going on, perhaps. I will check it. They ought to be on. I can see Ellie Chan's on there.
Yes, yeah. I actually decided not to go to London. Well, for 2 reasons. One's very personal because my wife is disabled and I can't really leave her all day. And secondly, as my MP has already explained in 2 occasions that he's opposing Rosebank and why he's opposing Rosebank, I just felt it may be a little bit superfluous to go up and.
Yeah.
I mean, no, he hasn't signed the pledge, but even if I ask him to sign the pledge to his face, he probably won't. I mean,
yeah. No. Well, I mean, thank you for considering coming, David. I totally understand your reasons, but I think you do.
If I lived nearer London, it probably would be less of a problem.
Yeah.
But I live down in Devon, live in South Devon, so it's quite a trek. It's quite a trek up there on its own.
Yeah, that is it is a distance. Yeah, no, it's totally understandable. I think the question about, is it worth it? I think if he is genuinely really opposed to Rosebank and is actually advocating for it to be stopped, then that's actually what the point of the pledge is anyway. So the pledge is sort of a means to an end. So if someone signs the pledge, then it's like, great, they're in. Then we start asking them to do stuff. So and I think for some politicians, pledges just aren't their cup of tea for whatever reason. But I think it's that thing of what we would be asking folks to do once it's clear that they're opposed to Rosebank. So I think he could still ask questions, take brief, that sort of thing. So, David, what we can do, like there is a little section about what you can do as an MP to advocate to stop Rosebank. So we can share that, and that's the thing I think. To share.
If you
with
could
him.
share that, please. Yes.
Of course.
It's Martin Wrigley, MP for Newton Abbot.
Yeah. Okay.
That would be helpful. Thank you. I'd appreciate that.
Thanks, David.
Thank you.
We'll go to Jamie for probably our final question, and we'll start to wrap up. Jamie, do you want to unmute?
Thank you, Alan, and thank you, Susie. That was an absolutely fantastic talk through everything Rosebank. I learned so much. It's really brilliant. My MP has yet to say whether she's a Labour MP, and she's yet to say whether she will support the pledge against Rosebank or not. We did quite a big action locally and got 100 odd postcards signed and sent to her, but I think she's being a bit coy about it. She's a backbench Labour MP, but she also sits on the Environmental Audit Committee, and I just wondered, is there anything I could be saying to her with that in mind that might just be able to force her hand a little bit to get her to say where she stands on it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you'd think you'd be quite inclined to be trying to help the environment if you're on that particular committee. I mean, the only other thing actually that I've just thought, Jamie, is there is quite a new early day motion about Rosebank that's just been set up. So I wonder if that might be the sort of thing for those that would prefer a more parliamentary procedure way to show their opposition. I've just actually found it, and I'm going to pop it in the chat. I think asking if they might sign that might be quite good. But I think, I mean, at the moment, it's interesting time for this campaign because there is so much heated debate about oil and gas. So where normally we'd be saying to politicians, go and have a debate or join a debate, they're all in a debate at the moment, pretty much every day about oil and gas. So what we're trying to do at the moment is just get the most up-to-date briefings, which we can share as part of the follow-up, the MP briefings, with just all the latest lines. And it's asking them, please appeal to Secretary, appeal to Ed and say, don't approve it. I think one of the things is showing how broad the opposition to Rosebank is, and particularly good for him to be seeing from his own party, if you've got a Labour MP, from his own party, that there is really strong backing for him. Because I think the government needs to feel that they've got the political space to make this significant decision. Whichever way they call it, they're going to irritate a lot of people. So they're basically just got to choose who they're going to upset with the decision, because if you approve it, you're going to annoy a lot of people. If you reject it, they're going to annoy a lot of people. But one has got the backing of science and an enormous civil society movement behind it. The other one has just got the oil and gas industry. So I think it's just demonstrating the broadness of the opposition against Rosebank is a really key thing that particularly Labour MPs could help with at the moment.
That's brilliant. Thank you. I'll give her another push using the EDM.
Yeah, and I might, following this, actually get your help, Suzi, on my own MP. Well, my own MP is the net zero. Well, he was the net zero spokesperson for SNP, and you probably know SNP are very much playing a cards close to their chest game on this. It is something that is a bit tricky because they are really playing that it's a devolved messer, even though he's an MP. So it's a bit tricky. So I'll share that response. But thank you so much again for your time, and I hope it's useful for everyone. We will send around the resources just to make sure that you've got everything you need, whether to take action online or the resources just to look into more of this. But yeah, thanks again for your time. Is there anything you would like to close on, Suzi? Is there anything extra that you haven't been able to plug or mention?
I think the main thing is to thank all of you for your time this evening. It's very committed and dedicated people that I think take the time to really learn about what's happening and then decide to do something about it. So I commend you all and thank you enormously. The Stop Rosebank campaign has been just completely people powered the whole time it's existed. So yeah, I appreciate all of you a lot. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And I've got one final thing. I realized literally just before this call I was going to mention it, but there is always I think what's been really useful about this call is that feeling of you can get to people from different places. So we can speak about the environmental case, but we can also speak about the economic case and the moral case. And something that surprised me was I was one of these boring people that watches parliamentary discussions, and that there was a Labour MSP who stood up and spoke about the moral case against Rosebank. It was this afternoon. And it was really interesting because she framed it in the way of a just transition. She said, can a just transition be true if this is if this is connected to what's happening with Israel and Gaza? And it is that feeling of that will speak to different MPs and MSPs than going to them and saying, this is a carbon budget argument or this is a jobs argument. And I thought it was interesting that she didn't stand up and make a case for the things you would expect on Rosebank. She stood up and said, on the just transition, are we speaking about justice for who? Because this is a connection of it. And it's a sign that people are getting through. You know, as I said, I'm one of these people that watches parliamentary debates, and unless you're really like watching all of these things, there's so much noise in the media and in Parliament. But if you're really looking out for a particular topic, you do see a lot of MPs are bringing this up, and you mentioned the early demotion. People are using opportunities in committees, and that is it's not coming from nowhere. It's coming because of our emails and postcards and our calling MP offices and saying, you've got a voice, can you raise this? When will you raise this? So every message really does matter, and the time now is really to make them feel that pressure and to try and demonstrate. It's something that a huge amount of people don't believe is the direction, and there is an alternative direction to go in, which can provide some of the solutions they're looking for. It's not a blocking of a project. It's a stopping going in the wrong direction in order for us to get the right path. So again, thank you all for your time. Thanks, Suzi, for coming and sharing all of your knowledge with us, and we'll be in touch with you, many of you, I'm sure. Thanks.
Thank you, everyone.
Cheers. Bye.